Thank you everybody for joining us today. First and foremost, I really want to thank Zach and his team for organizing this nice workshop, where we look forward to hearing these nice presentations and to having a nice discussion afterwards on how we can improve upon all these tools. So the last two talks that you'll see are on the Marine Energy Atlas and the Marine Energy Environmental Toolkit. Those two tools were recently incorporated into the PRIMRE umbrella. And PRIMRE is the portal and repository for information on marine renewable energy. And we figured, given that those two tools now fall under the PRIMRE umbrella, it would be good to make sure that we're all the folks in the audience are aware of what PRIMRE is and how it can support marine energy projects and the industry as a whole. So this is why I'm first up on the presentation. So just to build a little bit of context as to how PRIMRE came about. So whenever you're trying to provide support for an industry and to make sure so that marine energy can further develop moving down the line, the types of data and information that you are interested in can go from technology, so a lot of the design and the testing that goes into it, some information about the resource itself, so waves, tides, currents. But you also want to have some information on environmental aspects so that you can produce energy, but do it responsibly without having detrimental effect on the environment, or at least reducing it. But also you want to have some understanding of a lot of the standards that go into making sure that you can develop these technologies, but do it in a safe manner and in a manner that's consistent with the industry. But you also want to have an idea of also the software and codes that are available out there so that you can further refine your technologies or any of these other aspects that as your technology or your project evolves in the line. And that's where this need comes about of you need something that can integrate and provide access to all this data and be used as a tool to disseminate and to integrate all this information into one place. And that's where PRIMRE came in. Again, it's the portal and repository of information on marine renewable energy. And it was this need was identified by the Water Power Technology Office, and they set out to provide that 3 national labs lead this effort. And this right here is this slide kind of just shows like our one slide depiction of what PRIMRE is. As you can see here on the right is kind of like our central logo as to what it represents. And what PRIMRE is this portal that kind of unifies these we call knowledge hubs that come all together and provide information to our end users. So I will talk a little bit more about the knowledge hubs in the following slides, but the other things that PRIMRE tends to provide is some information on marine energy basics. We also have an advanced calendar that we tend to upkeep. We have archived webinars. We have other educational resources, so like STEM pages, and we also have access to other data and tools that might be relevant for the industry. So that's the need that we're trying to fill in terms of providing a one-stop shop for all of this information. So just starting to build out as to more what PRIMRE is. So in the beginning, what we had is we had an idea of what we needed, and we also needed a way to unify all of these knowledge hubs. So there was these disparate types of information that was hosted in different places across the web. Some of it existed and some of it did not exist. And that's where you see the 7 knowledge hubs that we have here. And I will describe them further in the following slides. But when you have each of these knowledge hubs, they each have their own type of information. They also have their own kind of theme. And what PRIMRE is doing is bringing it all together in a cloud-based retrieval format so that you can access this information quickly and efficiently and easily. And then also what we've done is it's all tied together using a central platform that uses a one-stop search. And this one-stop search is designed so that you can just type in anything like you would in Google and access the rich set of resources and other information that's out within each of the PRIMRE knowledge hubs and other aspects of the system. And now I'm just going to go into quickly provide a little bit of context as to what's found within each of these knowledge hubs. First is the MHKDR, the Marine Hydrokinetic Data Repository. It's been around for a while now, for like a decade, maybe longer. But it is the central repository for all data and research that is funded by the Marine Energy program of the Water Power Technology Office. So whenever a project gets funded, their important milestones, and whenever the resulting data that comes out from a project, the data ends up on the MHKDR. And then currently, the MHKDR has over 350 data sets. And in terms of individual resource entries of content, there's almost 2,000. And then within MHKDR, there's over 30 terabytes of data from just different types of research, development, and other types of analyses that are held. So this is the central repo where all of the funded work is contained. So that's the MHKDR. Next is TETHIS. TETHIS is a document database, and it is a document database that's with a theme of the environmental impacts from marine energy, wind energy, and offshore wind as well. And currently it has over 8,500 documents. They are journal papers, they are reports, there are other types of media, so like just presentations, also like recordings of webinars, and all that information is held within TETHIS. And it kind of holds as like a central location where folks who are interested in the environmental aspects of this type of research can go and find this information. And then other features that are within TETHIS are, there is the knowledge base that has the documents. There's also a pretty nice map viewer that shows where these documents, either where the research was conducted or where it was developed. There's also an events calendar. We have a TETHIS Blast, which is a newsletter that goes out every other Friday. And then also I wanted to highlight the glossary, which is a place where we've kind of unified and kind of standardized a lot of the terminology that goes into the environmental effects of marine energy development. So that plays an important role in when I go down the line and describe some other aspects of PRIMRE. So similar to TETHIS, we also have TETHIS engineering. So TETHIS has been around for a while, and it was great. So what we got from feedback from our users is that it would be great to have something similar also for the engineering aspects and the more technical aspects of PRIMRE. So this contains, at this point, over 7,000 papers, reports, and other media about the device schematics, some of the code that was done to analyze the resource. And then it also provides similarly a knowledge base for access to these documents, where they were developed or where the focus of the research was. Same thing, there's events. There's also a really nice photo library. So where we third-party developers provided images, open access images of their devices, so that other users from the community could go in and access these images and use them for their own purposes, for like their own presentations. We also have TETHIS Engineering has its own newsletter called the PRIMRE Blast. It used to be the TETHIS Engineering Blast, and that goes out on the other Friday when the TETHIS Blast doesn't go out. But similar, we also have a glossary that goes into the same thing as TETHIS. We're trying to kind of standardize the terminology that's used to organize these documents, and also it's also used to organize other aspects of PRIMRE as well. Next is marine energy software, and again, this was kind of developed as a need that was identified by our community. And what it does is it systematically catalogs code and other software that is relevant to marine energy. And then what it does is at this point, the Marine Energy Software Knowledge Hub has a collection of over 200 commercial and open source software. And it's organized in a specific way to where you can look at it by license type. So if it's commercial or a certain type of open source, you can also look at it by programming language or how much it costs. So you can go in and try to filter out so that you can figure out which software suits your needs better. But it also provides access to, especially for the open source side, there's some metrics that you might want to use in terms of whether or not you want to adopt a specific software. So it provides access to these metrics so that you can determine this if you want to use it for your particular project. And there's also one thing that I want to emphasize is that the Marine Energy Software Knowledge Hub is currently undergoing a reorganization. So right now it's in two pieces, the code catalog and the code hub. And we're trying to bring them all together into one kind of central piece. And but that work is ongoing, and we're hoping to have it finished within the next year or so. Next is Telesto. And then Telesto is a collection of guidance and wikis that host that guidance on testing and measurement. It provides guidance on how you would test a particular device, what type of measurements you should be doing, what's the best way to go about setting up your tests, and then just other guidance as to like how you go about standardizing these tests, also how a test might differ when moving from like a test tank to moving out to the ocean, because salt water tends to complicate everything. So those wikis are there. The Telestra also has a database on commonly used sensors and instrumentation by the industry, and another database on testing facilities within the United States, so that stakeholders can go and see what facilities are available to them. And similar, it's also Telestra is currently undergoing a reorganization, and the theme that's going to reorganize Telestra is the project lifecycle of marine energy. And this is where we think the Marine Energy Environmental Toolkit will fit really well. And this is where a lot of the content that will be presented later will kind of be accessible from when you're exploring PRIMRE. Continuing on, we also have the Marine Energy Projects database. And this database is it's a relational database on over 1,000 marine energy projects that have happened in the US and around the globe. And it provides a historical record of these past deployments as to where they were. And then the really interesting thing about it is that it's relational and it's organized in a way to where you can see the projects, the devices, the test sites, and the organizations that were involved. So you can see which organizations play a key part in certain areas and which types of devices. So this is where it allows you to explore what's been done. And then the other thing that we really like about how it's set up now, the projects database, is that it also provides access to other aspects of PRIMRE, so how they relate to one of the other knowledge hubs whenever a particular project that's listed here. Continuing on, this is the Marine Energy Atlas. So this is going to be the focus of the next talk, and Nick and Katie will talk about that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but basically it is a GIS of resource characterization data that was developed for the United States, and it's an open access platform that where folks can go in and explore the data in a map format. And it also contains some international layers that were recently incorporated. But I'll let Katie and Nick talk more about that down the line. And then this is the end of the knowledge hub. So now the next step is to talk more about some of the what we would call like successes that we've had from PRIMRE from other aspects. So one recently that came up is the Ocean Energy Systems GIS. So the OES GIS system that used to be held out of Fraunhofer, this company is leaving the marine energy space. So what PRIMRE was tasked with is bringing that data into the Marine Energy Atlas. And this is something that we recently did, and it involved porting over about 50 gigabytes of data and making sure. So now the Marine Energy Atlas not only has data on the US, but also internationally. But this is just to quickly touch base because Katie and Nick will talk more about that down the line. So more successes. This is one of our big early successes that we have for PRIMRE, and it's the development and publishing of these data guidelines and best practices for data sharing. So what this is doing is, remember, early on, a lot of these databases lived in certain disparate locations. So the MHKDR and TETHIS, what they make use of is a lot of the glossaries and the standardization that's been put together to bring them to integrate these platforms so that they can be accessible using PRIMRE and the centralized search. And all other new developments that have come down the line tend to use the same guideline practices. And we've actually published them as well, so that outside of what we've done within the US, other databases, whether it be internationally, they can also use our guideline practices so that they can try to start to share information between our database and international databases. And this is something that we've been actively exploring in other aspects of the work that we've been doing. So some other successes that we've had is what we've also pursued is what we call value-added initiatives. And the way this works is now that we've set up the PRIMRE portal, and it's bringing the information from all these different knowledge hubs and other places together, we want to be able to add value to it. And one of the efficient ways that was identified by WPTO is what we call signature projects. And these are big projects that have existed for multiple years. And they produce lots of different types of data and information. So they might produce documents that go to the TETHIS, they might produce data that goes to MHKDR, they might also produce software that goes to the Marine Energy Software Knowledge Hub. So what a signature project does is it puts it all in one location, and it makes it really easy for the user to be able to go in and look up what's available for advanced wet dynamics and control. So they can look at all the documents, all the data, and so forth. And It provides an easy way to access this content, but it's also very useful for the projects themselves, and then it allows them to easily track the access to their, just to see how much interest there is in this particular project and collection of statistics for them. So similar to the value added project, we also have called lessons learned. And this is similar in that now that we have information, we also have an idea of who a lot of the key players in the industry are, especially within the US. And what the lessons learned initiative involved is we wanted to make sure that the key lessons that were learned within the industry, whether they be good or bad, that they're not lost as people enter or leave the marine energy space. And what we ended up doing for the lessons learned initiative is we interviewed different members of the marine energy community using a semi-structured survey. And then we went in and we kind of categorized their responses into a main category and a secondary category. And what you do once you have these different categories, you can kind of establish relationships between these different categories to see if there's any trends as to what these members of the community kind of are most interested in or concerned about. And that's what you see here in this diagram. So the thicker the line, that means that more of our interviewees mentioned it. So one thing that they all mentioned was something how business management is associated with funding. So this just kind of just brings it out as to what are the things that they tend to talk about most. And this is something that was released, the lessons learned was released onto PRIMRE, made live earlier this year. So please explore it if you get a chance. And then some of the other successes that we have is how PRIMRE supports other WPTO projects. And one project that we were asked to support is TMR, which is testing and expertise for marine energy. And what TMR wanted was a central place to have just all their documents and all the data that's produced from TMR projects for it can live. Given that we already had this signature project structure set up, what we did was just set up a signature project for TMR. And you can see here's a screenshot of the TMR page. You can see information about each of the RFTSs. And then right now, you see below is this table that shows the metadata on products from 15 completed TMR projects that have been submitted to PRIMRE. And we'll be adding a lot more as more TMR projects happen down the line. So this is TMR. Similarly, we were also tasked with building something similar to the TMR one for UMERC, which is the University Marine Energy Research Community. And this is the early phases of developing this page, but UMERC has put together some events and some other products, and we're providing easy access to that information there using the signature project structure. So this is for, and then one other WPTO project that we supported was Marine Energy Performance Metrics. So this was a project that was underwent by researchers at Sandia, NREL, and PNNL, where they compiled a list of 36 performance metrics that are used to assess performance of marine energy systems. And once this report was put together, they and WPTO thought that it would be good for the community to have access to these metrics. And that's what we did here. We built a database that has all these metrics, and they're organized by category. So by technology, by application, by TRL, codes and standards. And this makes it easy for the community to go in and find these metrics so that they know what their WPTO and others are using to kind of assess the performance of their projects. And then one last thing that I have here, another big success that we have is on data sharing. Again, we published those guidelines and standards, and we've been using those to try to increase the interest in sharing data internationally. And then the past 2 years, we've had an international data sharing workshop. And then this year, we're going to have one more, and it's going to be with PRIMRE and Ocean Energy Systems. We're going to have this workshop on May 2nd. And for anybody who's interested, please, here's the QR code here so you can attend. I'll also put the registration link in the chat so that we can all attend. Last year was very successful. We had presentations not only from PRIMRE, but also from Marine Data and Rescore. So these are some databases that are based out of Europe. So we look forward to having more interactions in terms of increasing data sharing across the space. And I think this is the end of it. I want to make sure that I acknowledge the other PRIMRE PIs, Andrea Copping and John Weirs, and the rest of the large PRIMRE team that we have supporting this project and making it a big success. Thank you.
Thanks, Cesar. So up next will be Katie Peterson and Nick Gilroy from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory.
Hi, thanks for that introduction. And thanks, Cesar, for going over PRIMRE and mentioning the atlas. So I'll just go over the atlas a little bit more in going into some detail on our data that's on the atlas. And then I will pass it over to Nick, who will then give a demo of the atlas. So here we go. All right, so the Marine Energy Atlas, as Cesar mentioned, is a knowledge hub on PRIMRE, the portal and repository for information on marine renewable energy. The Atlas is an interactive web app that allows users to visualize, analyze, and download marine renewable energy data. The overarching goal of the app is to make it easy for different stakeholders to access data that can help them plan for renewable energy projects. The data can be visualized in the app to quickly get information, or it can be downloaded for detailed analyses on one's desktop. The Atlas is set up in a way so that our team can add layers and tools that are useful for different stakeholders. This architecture is really flexible and future-proof. It's called Vader. Nick can speak to that if we have time, but it's very fancy cloud web architecture. So the main data set on the Atlas is the WPTO Wave Hindcast data set. And this data set was generated from a multi-lab collaboration between the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratory, and NREL. And this contains the highest resolution time series data of wave attributes in US waters. The data currently available on the Atlas are coastal waters within the US exclusive economic zones for Alaska, Hawaii, the West Coast, and the East Coast. So spatial resolution is 200 meters in nearshore waters. And the time resolution is every 3 hours when you download it from the cloud. And on the Atlas, it's averaged by year and month. So this data that you can visualize on the app includes the significant wave height, and this is the statistical calculation from the wave spectrum, energy period, directionality coefficient, and omnidirectional wave power. These have layers on the app so you can visualize and you can download this data, but you can also download data from the Hindcast data set for maximum energy direction, spectral width, mean absolute period, mean wave direction, peak period, and water depth. So the Atlas is really a portal to access even more data. Some of these, I'll just quickly go over how these data are relevant. So significant wave height is pretty self-explanatory, and it informs the operations and maintenance risks for wave energy converters and their design loads. Energy period is useful for calculating peak period, and that is an important term in WEC-SIM calculations. And then directionality coefficient is important because this is a coefficient that ranges from 0 to 1, and the closer to 1, that means there's higher directional spreading. And so the lower directional spreading, closer to 0, means that there's less complexity needed in mooring design and therefore lower costs. And then the omnidirectional wave power is just a summary metric of theoretical wave energy resource at a site. The other data on the atlas includes ocean current data, location of wave buoys with links to those data. So you can click on a wave buoy, point data on the atlas, and it takes you to the website that has the real-time data. We have ocean thermal data and we have salinity data. And as Cesar mentioned earlier, we've just incorporated the OES GIS data, and this has expanded the atlas into international data. So we have information on marine energy facilities, geopolitical data such as EEZ boundaries for other countries, locations of ports around the world, marine protected areas, and a pretty nifty bathymetry layer. We're adding more WPTO wave hindcast data to the atlas. So we'll have Gulf of Mexico data and various Pacific islands, so different territories within the US. And we'll extend the wave hindcast data sets through 2020. So they will be 40-year data sets. We'll also add extreme wave heights throughout not just the US, but globally, and have coarse wave data on the high seas. We'll also be adding some tidal model data sets, which will have similar visualizations and high resolution as the wave data sets. One of the tools that we have on the atlas is the capacity factor tool. And this is a pretty cool tool that allows people to determine how much power you can generate from your WEC or wave energy converter. So the capacity factor is the ratio of actual time average power output to maximum possible power output. And this is relevant for calculations where the resource is intermittent, like waves. This tool offers in-app processing functionality to calculate the capacity factor across the entire WPTO wave hindcast database. So it uses the omnidirectional wave power as one of the inputs. Users can provide a power matrix that represents their wave energy converter. And we have example power matrices from published reference models as examples. And the underlying calculations have been optimized in order to produce results in minutes. So it takes a few minutes to load, but it's significantly faster than doing it on your own computer without these back calculations. And this processing framework is designed to be expandable for new calculations and features. So the capacity factor tool is just the tip of the iceberg. Here are some results from the capacity factor tool. So you upload the power matrices, as I mentioned. If you create an account on the atlas, you can save those for future use and also view previous runs of the capacity factor tool. And the results show the capacity factor on the atlas, so the spatial output. And then you get a histogram with data over here. And this allows you to down select and constrain your results by criteria of interest, such as water depth or distance from shore. The next financial year, we're working on this multi-criteria decision analysis tool, which builds on the analytical infrastructure of the capacity factor tool. And it'll be more powerful and flexible as we ingest new layers into the atlas. We'll allow stakeholders to identify opportunities for projects based on different attributes and criteria that are of importance to them. So sort of like a preliminary siting tool. Users will be able to down select layers from different categories and weight them by level of importance. So if wave climate is the most important, or depending on the design of your wave energy converter, maybe the seabed morphology and geology of the area is crucial importance, you can prioritize those factors over other ones. Okay, so I'll pass it off to Nick and he will give a demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to walk through a brief demo of the Marine Energy Atlas and highlight some of its capabilities. So for the most part, I'm going to stick to talking through the data library and then how to download and query the data. So if you want to follow along, you can visit maps.nrel.gov/marine-energy-atlas. And so that will bring you to what we're seeing here. So we can dive right in. So this is what the application looks like when you first visit it. And so we are highlighting the WPTO wave hindcast data set. So that one is loaded by default. And so we're going to just add a couple other data sets on to this one, and I'll just walk through some of the key functionalities. And the main purpose of why I want to do that is because the team's been busy thinking through various improvements that we can make to the application to improve the experience. And so there's a couple things that if you've visited the site recently are a little bit different now. And that's just kind of been some subtle improvements behind the scene. So let's jump right in. So we have the data library. And so when you visit that, there used to be a search box here at the top. And so we've reorganized this a little bit with a ability to filter by category. And as Katie was mentioning, as well as Cesar, we've recently integrated data from OES. And so this is just a quick way to sort and see all of the different categories of data sets within the application. So this is just a way to slice and dice. There's obviously a lot of things happening in the application. There's a lot of different data sets. So let's go ahead and add a couple. So let's just add some of the OES data sets. So I'll go back and filter by OES, and we can add a couple. And there's one, let's see. So another capability we have is to filter by title. And I want to add the wave data set. So as you can see, it's responsive. And so it filtered down to wave. I'll go ahead and do that. And as you can see, some data sets are starting to appear. I'll back this out and just add a couple more. So we could add tidal current and salinity gradient. And so as you can see, we've added quite a few data sets. They've been populating on the right-hand side in the legend. I'll get to that in a second, but just a quick way to see all of the data sets that have been added. I can just reorder by clicking this arrow. And so you can see now I've got just a quick snapshot. I've added quite a few data sets. And so that's one aspect of the application, right, is that we're hosting all of these GIS data sets. And so one thing you could do is if you knew exactly what you were looking for and you didn't even want to use the Atlas to explore it, you could simply go ahead and download that data. And so I'll kick off an in-browser download. There are other data sets to download, and there's another workflow that I will get to in a minute. As Katie was mentioning, we have the wave hindcast data set, and that one is quite a large spatial temporal data set. And so there's a little bit of a different download flow, and I can get to that in a second. The other improvement I just wanted to highlight here is that we've added these tags. And so this is something that we had implemented on the back end, and this is just another way to see all of the different capabilities and data sets within this platform. And so if the categories and titles weren't illustrative enough, there's just different ways that we've categorized some of these data sets. And so you can leverage these as a way to just see what data sets do we have for Hawaii, for example, or what data sets for the Gulf of Mexico, or what political data sets do we have maybe for more of an administrative boundary layer, so on and so forth. So that's just another quick way to work through these data sets. Let's see, I'll clear out the browser download. Then I'll go ahead and close the data library for now, just because we've got data in here. So obviously this is interactive. You can pan and zoom and look for data sets of interest. And so we have all of our data sets that I've activated in this legend here. And so you can see there's various functionalities. I could reorder data sets, bring them to the front, send them to the back in terms of the legend. You're able to also download the data here as well. If you weren't sure what was the metadata behind a given data set, we have this information icon here. And so let's jump into downloading. So as I mentioned, you're able to simply download any of the traditional GIS data sets just in browser. But the one thing that our team had to solve for is that the wave hindcast data is about 20 terabytes of a spatial temporal data set. And so that's not something that we could just easily facilitate just through the browser. We could download this entire data set. And so what we have here is if you go to download this data set, there's a little bit of a different iconography where it's got the download in the cloud. And so that's going to change the application state. And so I can go ahead and click that, and it will note that we've changed into this large scale data download state. And so we can opt to not show this message again, or we could just go ahead and start downloading at any point. If I wanted to get back to where I was, I could just exit that download state just like that. But I'll go back and select that. And so then here I want to just identify a location. I could do type ahead. So for example, if I was at NREL, I could search and see what's there, but these are offshore data sets. You might be searching more for a pier or something closer to shore. Obviously, NREL's in a landlocked position. So one of the things we could do is also the shape query or region query. And so just using this drop down here, I can select one of those, and then I can just start to zoom in and think about an area that I might want to identify for download. So I just simply click and drag, and it's going to tell me that there's two data sets available for download here. We have the West Coast virtual buoys as well as the West Coast wave model. So I can go ahead and select that data set. And so then there's attributes within that data set. And so you could select one or many. Right now, all of them have been selected. And so these are all of the variables within that. As Katie was mentioning in the PowerPoint, there's significant wave height, there's energy direction, peak period. So there's all of these variables that are included. And then we have, it's multidimensional. So we have all of these different years of data available. So you could select one or many years. So here I could just select arbitrarily 1986, or I could simply select all for download. And then I can select the temporal interval. So this is at 180 minutes. And then these are a couple handy things if you wanted to include leap day in the data set or convert it from UTC to local time. And so you'll note, so this is a shared service that just based on the size of the data set here that we've surpassed the download limit capabilities just because it's trying to queue multiple requests. But there's a couple things I'll still highlight here. So one is that to service this download, we simply just ask for your email. So I'll go ahead and put that in. But since we've exceeded the limit, I can't click download, but I could view code. And so what we've done here is that we wanted to also reduce the adoption for leveraging our API. And so all you have to do is you could sign up for an API key and you could access this data from the cloud. And if you entered it here, you could arbitrarily put a key, and you can see that it will pre-format the API key as well as your email, and then it's going to tell you all of the points that you've selected. So this is just kind of pulling from our metadata. So we've pre-formatted a request here, and so you could simply download this as a script or copy it to your clipboard and go ahead and access the data through the API. So I'll just revise my query here just so you can see what this would look like in terms of complete flow. And so we can go back to the point, and I can simply select a single location. It's going to, again, query the backend, see what data sets are available, go for the West Coast, all variables, all years. And so then, let's see. Looks like I've got everything in it. I've got my email and I'm ready to download, so I can go ahead and kick that off. I've got a message up here that once we've extracted the data from the cloud, it'll be sent to my email address where I can click a link to download the data. So that's a bit of the download flow. And then I just want to quickly highlight the querying capabilities. So one thing is that we've added all of this OES data, and so we could maybe go over to Europe and we can use some of these map tools over here on the right-hand side to just slice and dice the data set. So if I knew a specific location that I was interested in, I could simply enter coordinates. I could use the point query, and that would return a single location. I could also use the region query. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to arbitrarily draw an area. And so you can see, since I've added a couple different OES data sets, in that region query area, I've got 3 different data sets that are active here. And so I can go ahead and query that wave data set. And so what happens here is we've got a table that pops out. And so all of the locations within that area have been highlighted. And so one of the things I can note is that as you hover over this table, it's going to pull back all of the records, but it's going to highlight which one you're looking at. You could also, if you wanted to dig into this table, so I've got 14 records were returned. And so if I just wanted to see all things, I could just adjust the table here. I could also pop the table out just to kind of get a full width view. And then the other thing is we still have this open, so I could add in other data sets and they'll simply be added as in a tabbed format. So I could just add title current, and I could see what's here. And so same thing, it's going to highlight the points as I hover over this table. And if I wanted to download the data, I could simply go ahead and kick off a download here. And then once I'm happy with my query results, I could delete all queries from the map. So I'm going to pause there, and hopefully we have some questions, but I think that was my allotted time. And I guess I would just make an echo of Tim's opening remarks that we would love to hear from you in terms of what additional capabilities you would find valuable in a tool like this. But with that, I'll pause and hand it back.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Katie. And yes, reminder, if you do have a question, we won't be answering them immediately, but please put them in chat so we can kind of help coordinate and facilitate that process a little bit better. All right. So I'll be sharing my screen to do our final presentation on the Marine Energy Environmental Toolkit. So I'll be providing a brief overview of its development and kind of the goal of the toolkit. And then I'll be doing a quick demonstration focusing on some new functionality related to a biological assessment repository of DOE water power awardees. So the Marine Energy Toolkit was developed over 3 years with an interdisciplinary team, which you can see below the different logos of our team members. So we had a lot of technical team members to do the coding. We had industry interests such as Pacific Energy Ventures and ORPC, as well as folks from the European Marine Energy Center to provide the international perspective as well. And we really focused on a user-centered design to ensure that the toolkit was meeting the needs of future users, which was primarily regulators at the state and federal level that would be reviewing permits, as well as developers that would be developing the permits and going through the permitting process. And that would be technology developers, as well as project developers. And so this was shown at the tail end of Cesar's workshop, but since 2022, the project is now part of the PRIMRE team. And so PRIMRE, as Cesar shared, has a lot of databases and information repositories. And so the Marine Energy Environmental Toolkit is actually a little unique, where it's not necessarily a database or data repository, but we do aggregate information from the TETHIS knowledge base. to share and bring together other sources of information for regulators and developers to use. So the general concept of the toolkit was to create a one-stop shop for users to access relevant information to help facilitate the permitting and licensing of marine energy projects in the United States. And the idea is by linking to existing information, we can leverage that information that was curated and developed over several years by multiple organizations to help the permitting process to efficiently and effectively go on. Our current sources of information are literature from the TESIS Knowledge Hub on the marine energy side, the spatial information from the ocean reports in the marine cadastre, which is managed by BOEM and NOAA, and then permitting documents taken from the FERC e-library. Additionally to this information, our team during the development curated additional regulatory resources and put them up on the OpenEI wiki platform, which is managed by PRIMRE, so that they can be edited in the future as regulations and permitting requirements change. And all of this information goes into the toolkit that allows users to use and manipulate the information based on their interests and needs. And the way that we did this is by utilizing the same terms, which is stressor and receptor and interactions, to organize and synthesize information from the various data sources. So the conceptual model, which is shown on the screen, organizes information into the stressors, so what is introduced into the environment by the project, and receptors, what is at the actual project area, or that could be impacted or affected by the project, into the potential effects of the project. And so users can select which stressors and receptors they are interested in to help down select and further refine the information into the toolkit. So it's highly customizable and really responsive to what users are looking for. Additionally, for the synthesis of the regulations related to state and federal regulations, we developed a flow chart, which you see pictured on the left, that asks key questions to users about their project that again helps them organize and down select from the curated information developed by the project team. So I'll kind of review this in a minute, but it's an interactive flow chart where users can answer their questions, click on certain things, and then eventually be guided to linked resources on OpenEI. Okay, so with that, I'm going to start the demonstration. And so here is the Marine Energy website. So it's marineenergy.app. If you want to kind of take a look at it right now, I can provide it in the chat. But what I'm going to kind of do is kind of show you an overview of where to find information, and then go to our developer site, which has the biological assessment repository up on it, and kind of talk through what we've done there so far. So on the homepage, we have a little bit of information of kind of our intended users, how developers or regulators may use the toolkit, and the basic structure of how to use the reporting tool, which I'll get into in a minute. Under the more, you can find about pages as well as an FAQ. If you run into a bug or something doesn't seem to be working correctly, you can also report that to our project team. I won't be going into a lot of detail on all the functionality in the toolkit since we have limited time. But one of the things that if you're interested in using the tool and understanding what else you can use it for, we've developed several walkthrough videos that show how you can interact with different information, such as the regulations piece, the FERC documents, custom reports, and then some environmental interactions as well. So with that, I'll go into the regulations. And so this, as I mentioned earlier, is just a walkthrough diagram asking basic questions about the project to lead you to the correct source of information. So the first one is if the project is grid connected. If it is, this means that the FERC is the lead agency. So we've linked to different sources of information, a memorandum of understanding between the Army Corps, or this is the Coast Guard, I believe, but between different federal agencies that you can access. Similarly, we've also included some additional, more detailed permitting guidance. So this is an example of a pilot grid-connected pilot project in state waters. And this diagram is from the Permitting and Licensing Handbook, which was updated recently, I believe in 2020 by PNNL. And this is actually a interactive one as well. So we provided links. So when you can see ESA consultation, which stands for Endangered Species Act consultation, you click that, it takes you to our OpenEI repository about the Endangered Species Act. So we have links to the actual statute, consultation under Section 7 for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, critical habitat for NOAA, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then additional example ESA documents. So you can see kind of everything from what the actual statute says, guidance from the different agencies, and then example documents for what it requires for that consultation. So again, the goal here is to provide a lot of information to users so they don't necessarily have to go anywhere else, but it's a good compilation of the requirements that you'll run into. And so that's the main focus of the regulations. I definitely recommend folks kind of take a look at that if you're not very familiar with the permitting and licensing process, but are a technology or a project developer. It's a great source of information. Now what I'll do is kind of pivot to our development site. So I'm on the development site because we're still working on the biological assessments repository, which will go live probably by the end of this month. But we want to kind of show what we've done and what to expect in the future related to the BA repository to kind of start daylighting it. But this is the reporting function. So if you go to the reporting tool on our main website, that will get you to this. The only thing that will be missing if you are on our project website right now is the bioassessments. And so the toolkit is organized in a couple different ways. This configure box on the left is what you get to interact with to change the information shown on the right. And so the way that we've organized it, and we kind of talked about it previously, is by tags. And so you can tag by technology, which we also include parent tags as well as child tags. So we have the current and title, for example. Pink relates to stressors, so this is behavioral interaction, EMF, noise, light, things like that. And then green is receptor. And so you can go to specific things like marine mammals. And then once you've selected that, your tag query, you can just click add. And as you click add, information on the right will down select. So these are all the projects, current title projects that you that are active or ongoing, were active in the US. And then similarly, you can add spatial queries as well using the map here. Say you're interested in Alaska, and you just drag, drop, and close. Now, the spatial query doesn't change everything that you see on the right, but that's generally speaking how you can create a tag. And then the way that we structured the reporting tools that you can now go through the different pieces in the top bar to understand additional information based on your tagging query. And so what the project team is working on right now is a map and table of excerpts for their biological assessments. So the goal is to essentially have awardees from DOE Water Power Technologies Office that developed biological assessments as part of their award, the ability to upload those to the toolkit as a way that future awardees know what is expected for these biological assessments, as well as helping share more information on potential ways to address environmental concerns. So this is a map, and it's similar to our projects map where it's interactive. If you click, you can down select, and you'll have access to the information and link to those documents here. And then similarly, what we've done is the table of excerpts. So just delete this so you can see. And so the table of excerpts will take specific language from the biological assessments and apply tags to them. So rather than reviewing a full BA or full document, you can just see what's taken out of it and tagged correctly. Let me see it. Get it to load. Okay, there we go. All right. So this is what the table of excerpts looks like. So we outline what the project is, we link to the document, and then we provide an excerpt related to the different tags that are shared. So again, this allows you to really down select a lot of information rather than having to review several documents. You have this nice table, which is also searchable related to text. So for example, you're interested in Alaska, it will down select to anything that has Alaska in it. And so again, the goal here is to really provide information to users efficiently and effectively without necessarily requiring them to sift through a lot of different documents. And so that's what the project team is working on. And again, we're working on making sure that it's ready to go live at the end of this month. And you can expect that coming up soon. Okay. So with that, I think we are ahead of schedule. We're going to start the Q&A session. Oh, actually, we're a little bit behind schedule. So if you have a question, please enter it into chat. We have the full project teams from, or not full, but most of the project team from PRIMRE, Marine Energy Atlas, as well as the Marine Energy Environmental Toolkit here to answer any questions you may have. If you'd prefer to unmute and ask your question verbally, please use the raise hand function and we can unmute you before we go onto the breakout rooms. And so for the first question, I'll ask this to the Marine Energy Atlas team. What additional layers would you like to see added to the Atlas? So Katie or Nick, do you have any thoughts on what additional information you'd like to see added to the Atlas?
Yeah, we're hoping to add more environmental layers and oceanographic layers, just to make it as wholesome of a platform as possible. Traditionally, the Atlas has been based on resources, and that's been great, but we realize that there's a need to be able to visualize that resource data with other layers as well at the same time, and different kinds of data. So we want it to be as helpful for people to plan a project as they can, and then maybe use other tools like the Marine Energy Environmental Toolkit as they get further down the planning phases.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. Does anyone else have a question? I'm not seeing any hands raised, and I don't see anything in chat just yet.
I got a question in the, I think it was directed to me, but it maybe should have been gone to everybody else. And it says, is there a way to correlate water depth from Google Earth in the Marine Energy Atlas? And I guess
Not at this time. Nick can speak to this a little bit more, but we want to be able to add, allow users to add data to the Atlas. We've been talking about that quite a bit within PRIMRE and other projects, and within the core Marine Energy Atlas team. It's been in the pipeline and on the to-do list for a while. Nick, do you want to give any more detail about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I think for our team, we're always trying to understand the use cases of how people are using our application and then linking it with other applications. So I think with something like that, it would be great to learn a little bit more about how people are using Google Earth and what kind of integration point there could be with the Marine Energy Atlas. In terms of what data we have in the Atlas, and trying to open up adding more to the public domain, that you can add your own data sets. That's something that we've been discussing internally. Right now, everything on the Atlas is highly curated just through the PRIMRE team, and trying to always make sure that what we're putting on the Atlas is something that's a well-vetted data source that is relevant and up to date. And so I think there's always just that stance of, if we develop the capability and expose that ingestion to the public, how are we ensuring that all of that is being monitored? So there's no immediate plans to do that, but it's something that's been discussed. And I think as we hear more demand, and as we identify the use cases around that, that's something that we can certainly put some development effort into to make that a possibility.
Yeah, and just to add to that, before we are able to ingest other data from people directly into the Atlas, you can also download that data and use the data that you have from Google Earth and do calculations and on your end. But we do want to make the bathymetry layer queryable, so you can down select, and maybe down the line, when we have that multi-criteria decision analysis tool up, do some correlations.
Thanks, Katie and Nick. And Garon Fredrickson in the chat asked that they are using Copernicus a lot today, and how is that different and similar to the Marine Energy Atlas?
I haven't used Copernicus yet, so this is my first time hearing about that tool. If anyone else has used it,
I'm not familiar with it either. I don't. Andrea, are you familiar with it?
I am not. I think
Okay.
the biggest thing is we've tried to make the Marine Energy Atlas very much so that the content, like so much of PRIMRE, is very specific to marine energy. It's a little, I think I know what Copernicus is, and I think it's more of an oceanographic database, and there's certainly going to be overlap. I think what we've tried to do with PRIMRE writ large and the Atlas is really pick those layers, those data sources that are specific to marine energy, so you can find that related information pretty easily. We get asked this question a lot, say for TETHIS or TETHIS engineering. And one of the things that we find that we do in PRIMRE is bring in information that is not necessarily, say, journal papers or the most commonly available, but that which is available worldwide if you go in and search for it and contact developers and contact researchers, etc.
And I guess the last thing to make sure that we have had multiple discussions with other databases to make sure that what we have on PRIMRE and on the Atlas can be easily incorporated with other data sets that are out there, whether they be like from NOAA buoys or something from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So those are things that we're very aware of, and it's just trying to get things to come together.
You're absolutely right, Cesar. And the International Data Sharing Workshop that Cesar mentioned earlier on May 2nd, we are going to try to focus more on geospatial databases. And so something like Copernicus might be a great one to be able to look at as an example of, do we have APIs that would allow us to easily search back and forth between the databases. So Goran, I would really encourage you to register for the workshop, and we can certainly talk about Copernicus or any of these other geospatial databases, because we're very open to not taking every bit of data available in the world, but rather making it very linkable and accessible. Thanks.
Thanks, Cesar and Andrea. Can you, Cesar, can you relink the registration for that in the chat, just so it doesn't get lost? Awesome. And thanks, Ron, for your question. Does anyone have any other questions? I haven't received anything directly. Well, I was reminded by one of my colleagues in chat that I had forgot to go over some of the spatial information in the toolkit. So I'm going to pivot that back to the toolkit momentarily, just to review that. So sorry for forgetting about that. But as I mentioned, this is the toolkit, and then you can interact with tags and spatial information here. So this is the spatial information we take from the ocean reports and applied tags to. And so as you add tags, this information is down selected. So for example, you're interested in current tidal, noise, EMF, and then you're interested really in marine mammals and fish. So when you click out and you add that, again, it changes. And this is just the spatial data sets. It's interesting. In the marine cadastre.
Yeah, sorry, Zach, that are the tags are they're additive, so there's no data set that has both marine mammals and fish, and the spatial data sets are mostly focused on the receptors, so the green tags. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben, for the reminder. So, for example, you would want to add, and you can add multiple tagging queries to what you're interested for. So we would add that. And then you can add another current title. And then fish. And so it adds the additional information that you're interested in. So thanks, Ben, for reminding me about that interaction. And I didn't demo the reports function just because that can usually sink into a black hole, but I do recommend that you check out the reporting function on the reporting tool. Okay.
If it's okay, Zach, I might just add that the way that this works too is that if you add a location on the left in the configure pane, then it will summarize these data sets in the output report with details. For instance, it will take the density surface models for whales and dolphins, and then calculate the average abundance of those layers in based on your spatial location entered. So I just thought that was worth pointing out. But that's in the report output.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And so if we don't have any other questions to address, I think that we can go ahead and go into the breakout rooms. And so we have that assigned.
Sorry, we did get a question from Jeff Herder. Jeff, do you want to ask your question? And then Nick can answer it live just in case other people have the same question.
And I'm okay. I've asked Jeff to unmute, so you should be able to unmute, ask his question.
Thanks,
Hi,
Zach.
Jeff.
Yeah, it's pretty. Thanks. It's pretty straightforward. So we have an online GIS data portal in New York, and I was just asking if it was possible to ingest map services from the atlas into our portal without download. We prefer not to download because we don't want to load up a server and we don't want to mess around with new versions as they're updated.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so we used to have an exposed geo server where you could just consume, WMS and WFS layers. With this recent move, especially with the 20 terabytes of the Hindcast data set, we don't have a service ready to go out of the gate. It's something that is in the realm of possible, but we don't have anything today that we could offer.
Yes. Thanks for the question, Jeff. If there's no other questions, I think we'll go to the breakout room. So we'll have 2 breakout rooms with a facilitator and note taker. And we'll go over kind of what we'll be doing in the rooms once we get there. So Katie, will you send us the breakout rooms?